Welcome to our Public Therapy, the show where we got problems and we talk about them a little too openly, too honestly, too publicly.
I like what you did there.
Absolutely. I'm Joe Jason,
And Harold Owens.
and we're continuing our mainline sessions.
Yeah, we do our public therapy in an attempt to better our own mental health and those of our viewers. All right, we're not licensed professionals, but we do have problems. I think that qualifies us sufficiently.
And we also like to make fun of them and bring a little bit of levity.
Yeah.
So join us as we have a little bit of fun. And I think that rather than having traditional fun, we're going to have a little bit of dark fun, some upsetting fun, maybe even some angry fun.
Yes.
As we talk about what boils beneath the surface, kind of that underlying rage.
For context, we just got done recording the check-in about pet peeves. So, in continuing that idea of things that are minor inconveniences that majorly annoy you, we're stepping it up a notch to things that are potentially major inconveniences that bring intense rage or unhealthy levels of anger.
Yeah, and just how do you deal with that?
Yeah, because it's a human emotion that's inescapable, like sadness or lethargy.
Yeah, which is interesting because I find personally that I normally have a default response that goes towards sadness and lethargy first. Like, that is kind of my default setting if I'm getting upset. And I think it has to do with kind of the flight or fight response, right? I fly, but I fly internally. I kind of start to shut down, which, isn't always the healthiest response, but that's kind of where I go to first. And the things that actually get me angry are either things that make me just like seethe and fume in like a quiet fury, or are pet peeves that ultimately I shouldn't be angry about, right?
Right.
Disproportionately angry, especially like if we've ever had like a debate. Like if we're talking about something that has real consequences and a real effect on people, right? Like we talked about abortion and different like views that are on that and things that people are very passionate about. And we were able to be respectful and I wasn't getting angry or seething. But then there was also a conversation that you, me, and our other roommate Sam had about
It was Mars colonization.
Yeah, colonizing Mars.
I remember this.
And I was just getting so angry about the dumbest thing.
Because it was I'm remembering this for context.
Yeah.
I think the question was something about how difficult it would be to maintain like some sort of cultural, I don't know, not homogeneity, but like...
It was like, how successful could a colony on Mars be, and is the success of it based on the culture that's created there or something consistent throughout human nature? And I was arguing that it's based on the culture that's created there. Ultimately a benign, unimportant thing.
Unprovable and unknowable at this point.
And untestable in any form.
And we got so heated, I remember that.
Yeah, and I think it has more to do with my ego than anything. So one aspect that I'll kind of start this conversation off with is that I feel like I tend to be more egotistical than I would like to admit, right? I get sad because something's wrong and therefore I blame myself. And so I get sad there. And then instead I get mad because how dare that person question me when I am right? And I'm right about the dumbest thing that cannot be proven and therefore cannot be unproven, and therefore I'm right without question.
Yes.
And so it's ultimately dumb and egotistical and something that I need to check myself on. But that's an example of how I can get in experience that rage and get that anger, and I need to manage that.
But I think we're onto something here
Yeah, lay it
because
out.
it's began with a disagreement,
Yeah.
which I think a lot of people's anger probably does. Like, sitting here, I'm struggling to think of an alternate path towards anger. Like, that doesn't involve you, like, just having a difference of opinions or beliefs or, like, plans.
Think about this. Are you always angry at another person? Is there always a different person that you're in disagreement with? And I would argue no.
Yeah,
right?
okay. Shameless plug because I'm not associated with the podcast, but it's come up so many times, so I'm gonna
lay it
say
out.
it anyway. There's a funny bit on a podcast called Cometown about basically a Tony Soprano character going to therapy, as he does many times in the show. Check out the show; it's a great show. But in the bit, this character is coming to terms with the fact that he is depressed, maybe, but he doesn't want to call it that. So he's like, "No, I'm not depressed. I'm self-pissed. I'm pissed off. I'm self-pissed," which I think is a valid. I mean, maybe not a medical term, but yes, you can be angry at yourself.
Yeah, and also you can be angry at just the world or like inanimate objects. Like how often do you just get upset with some random piece of technology that's just not working?
Vacuum all the time. I've got a pet who sheds little white hairs all over the place.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm angry at a vacuum and it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, so like I am paraphrasing because I haven't seen the movie in years, but I remember Inside Out, the Pixar film, anger was one of the emotions, and they described it as anger is what lets you know that something isn't fair, something isn't right. There is some sort of disconnect between how things should be and how they actually are. And there is some sort of underlying sense that this isn't right, this isn't how things should be. And that disconnect is what creates anger. And so...
Okay, shout out to Pixar for maybe
yeah.
consulting psychologists.
Oh, no, they do their research. They are dang good at it. Well, I've not seen a Pixar movie in years, so...
But I think that did great.
Yeah.
That was a very good movie. I didn't watch it.
Wonderful. I'm pretty sure there's a sequel in the works. So, again, I don't know how well their research is nowadays because I just haven't seen anything, but back in the day, they did their dang research. It's very impressive.
Yeah, I like that definition, honestly, because there's like a disconnect. You're like, things are this way. I think they should be this way. And now I feel anger. It's, an oversimplification, but it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and you can extrapolate it larger and larger into different areas, but that is, at least to some extent, where anger comes from. But that doesn't always mean it's right or rational. Because we can also be angry at things that, like I described, have more to do with my own ego, my own sense of what is right or wrong than what actually is.
Right. Because even by that definition of like a discrepancy between what is and what should be, we're flawed humans with
Absolutely.
like a limited, influence or even awareness of our surroundings.
Yeah.
So who's to say what things are or what things should be, right? Like you could be wrong on one or both of those ends, and so that discrepancy that you see or perceive might not be true.
Yeah.
Or it could be exaggerated.
And something that I know that we've talked about briefly off podcast, but do you remember a personality test I've brought up called the Enneagram?
I have. That one, is it different? It's Myers-Briggs is one and Enneagrams is another.
Yeah, those are probably the biggest two. And Myers-Briggs is kind of, in theory, about how you process information. So how you go through acquiring and then applying information you gather.
So this is bad podcast etiquette, but because it is relevant
Yeah.
to this actual
Absolutely.
discussion, I brought it up. I actually just did that test
Heck yeah.
probably 1 week ago because I was talking about it with my dad. So I don't know. Fun how those conversations can align.
Heck yeah.
But he sent me the link and I did the test, and
And these are numbered 1
yeah,
through 9.
and my biggest one was 1, and kind of a mix between 4 and 5. It says ones are defined by their belief that everything must be in order, and by their feeling that they must always be right. So I think you're on to something here.
No, and the core issue that ones have, ironically enough, is anger. Like, on that, I would be on a different number. I'm a 7. And my issue is instead gluttony. Consuming too much, not being able to say no to my whims and desires. And sometimes that means that I'm doing too much in the world. Sometimes that means I'm doing too much just in my mind. And I'm not relegating and using, self-discipline. Whereas the one, there is right and wrong, and there isn't a whole lot of gray in between. And so that, like, engineering scientist part of you is probably very in line with that.
It's interesting. Yeah, when I looked at the breakdown, it wasn't like obvious just this one section of all the numbers. Like everyone kind of has a little mix of these types, but that was the one that stood out the most. It's definitely the largest section of that little pie chart. The 1 and 5. Interesting, yeah. So yeah, I think people's response to anger would depend greatly on their personality type.
Absolutely, but part of that as well is that, and whether or not you fall into that category, I think that's something, for you to look at and see which of those 4, because if they were all pretty high, then I think you need to, like, read through and see what actually seems to fit you the best. But at least for the core concepts of the 1, its issue is anger, but its core beliefs are that things have a right and wrong to them. It's a very justice-seeking, like, aspect to people. And so it's not just that something is wrong, it's just that something is immoral because it is not right.
Right.
And so doing something improperly isn't just improper. It's not just another way of doing things. It is immoral to do so. And that's what creates anger to it.
Yeah. It's an accurate description, I'd say, of myself. Probably a lot of people listening have that kind of, like, I don't know, right or wrong binary form of thinking.
Yeah.
Where yeah, that's just how I kind of break down the world. So I'm trying to think of some times that I've actually been very angry and why I was, and then we could parse through the logic there or lack thereof. There was one time I was at I want to say a Kroger, maybe a Walmart, and there were just carts in the parking lot.
Yeah.
You mentioned this in our
for pet peeves.
in our pet peeve episode, but for some reason, the carts being there really angered me to the point where I thought it was a good idea to round them all up and just, like, block a road with them. Okay? So this is me being vulnerable with you and our audience, okay? This is the kind of stuff that just comes up in therapy, okay?
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Okay? So that's what I did. I was like, there was like carts everywhere. I'm like, who is getting these? Who is leaving these? So I guess in my mind I was like, if I put them right here, no one can ignore them. Sorry, like you're just gonna drive past the carts? Like, you can't. Here's the road's blocked, So I just had like 4 or 5 carts across this road in some store. And the whole time I'm collecting carts, I'm probably yelling like a crazy person. So not my best day.
So the actual manifestation of that I feel unqualified to like dive into. I'm gonna let you mull that over. But as far as like it connecting to that personality and just the idea of anger, well, you saw something that was unjust and immoral, and you decided to call attention to it. Anger was a response to try to make a correction to something that was not correct in the world. There was some sort of gap between what was and what should be. And so your anger compelled you to an action to try to make that correction, which is to essentially do a symbolic gesture of moving the cart so that way it could not be ignored anymore.
Yeah, but thinking about it, I could have just as easily put every one of those carts in this little bay, and then
Absolutely.
problem solved. But then,
Anger is not rational.
yeah, it wasn't logical at all.
And so it came from a feeling of some sort of justice or injustice, but that's not always right. And in fact, oftentimes our anger is completely misplaced, right? Think of just like the angry ex-boyfriend who's just like, constantly blowing up his like girlfriend's phone and might even get like physically like aggressive. Well, he feels like there's some sort of like injustice going on.
All right, we should be together, right? And so now I'm angry.
Yeah, there is some sort of role that we should each have, and you're not fulfilling that role in my life. Now, that's not rational, but it goes to that feeling of like there's something incorrect, there's incongruity in the world. There's something that is immoral in that, and that is something that compels me to anger. Now, how then do we try to correct that? Because from the outside, we can tell that, well, that's not accurate at all. His feelings of anger might be real. There might be some sort of sliver of truth in that, which is that he feels lonely, but then rationalizing that as there's something inherently incongruent with the world and something immoral about this is not true. So how do we then like start to correct our anger, process it more healthily when we see this kind of overwhelming emotional response?
Okay. Well, I'm reaching back to my therapy sessions, trying to remember. There's stuff where they teach you like 3 S's or something,
Yeah.
and you're supposed to be able to remember them all. And I want to say one of those S's was stop, which is a very good step to have in a multi-step process that, if you do it wrong, could lead to you doing something that you regret.
I mean, it's a good
It's
first
always
step
good.
for a lot of
Yes.
things.
So, my professional opinion, the 2 things I remember, they don't both start with the S, but it's stop and breathe. Super simple. I can't believe people get paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to be able to say these things. But they're right. They're onto something, okay? I think they went to school or something. But like, when you're in that mindset of like recognizing that incongruity and then feeling anger, and now you've got some nebulous impulse afterwards, whatever that is. It might be to like punch a wall or, I don't know, yell or something.
Or rearranged carts.
Right. Put carts across a road so no one can drive through. Whatever that response is, you can likely prevent that response by, well, one, stopping, which is kind of just stop what you're doing. Like, you're in some process, maybe you're in a conversation. That could mean stop the conversation. Maybe just literally saying, like, give me like 2 seconds and just walk away. Even if you're immediately going to come back. But in those 2 seconds, breathe.
Yeah.
Very undersold tip from a lot of professionals, but not only in like anger management situations, but like people forget. Like, this comes up for me. It's in games, which can also bring about some anger. Maybe we'll come back to that one. But in like competitive video games, sometimes you forget that breathing is like a automatic response, that you don't have to think about breathing to breathe, luckily. But sometimes when you're in like a very high stakes position, or your just mental load is very high, you can actually make breathing like a thing that you can think about doing. And it it helps in that sometimes you don't notice that you're holding your breath. That's kind of what I'm getting to. Like, you need to breathe. Thinking can be hard, especially in like complex problem solving, even day to day life, and some video games. And you have to remember to do all the basic functions of your body to the best ability, right? You don't think like, how do I breathe optimally? But sometimes that helps. And in a situation like you being extremely angry and doing something impulsive, stopping and breathing well, like regular breathing, you're not like panting, like, oh, I'm about to F some guy up or something. It's calm. It's like something to focus on that also helps your body do body things, like think rationally. So, long story short, breathing is important. And putting a manual pause on future events can give you that time that you need to kind of reorient yourself.
Yeah, so a few thoughts there. One, anger is not necessarily always directed towards a person, but it usually, or I'd actually say always has some sort of stimuli, right? You're not angry at nothing if you actually like take a moment and analyze. There's some sort of trigger thing that you are angry at. The anger is directed towards something, even if it's internal. And it's something that is also very high energy. It's an emotion that has energy to it and tries to compel an action. But it's a very instinctive action. And so you're not necessarily thinking rationally about the results and if this is actually something that's helpful and productive, or if it's just what feels good in the moment. And that's why I think that, stopping and breathing help. It's because it's forcing you to take a moment and to gain some control. So rather than acting on instinct, you're taking a moment to actually gain control of yourself.
Yeah,
And
I like
by
that.
doing
Yeah.
so, you're then able to determine, well, is this an action I should still take? Because anger is not inherently like a bad thing. It's not even something that is like sometimes it's the appropriate response. Like, if somebody is bullying you or bullying your sibling, you should be angry at them. That doesn't mean that the appropriate response is to go punch them, but breathing and taking a moment and then approaching it rationally, you need to stop it because there is that incongruity that is a rightful incongruity. But you might also take a moment, breathe, and realize, wow, I'm really angry at this video game. I'm probably feeling that way because I feel some sort of entitlement to win. Like I did the things I thought I needed to, I pressed the right buttons at the right time, and I still lost. And that is an incongruity with how the world should work. I should have been able to win. And so that anger is a bit more irrational, right? Because sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but you can always try to do better. And then the emotional knee-jerk reaction response, whatever you do in that anger, is probably not the best choice.
Probably. If you're experiencing actual rage, like road rage or gamer rage, which I think can be even more severe, stopping, thinking, and trying to be rational about it would help, because I like what you said about anger being instinctual. I think that's right. Like, it's a very base emotion, probably up there with like fear and maybe
Yeah.
like, I don't know, assume love came after. But yeah, because it's an instinctive thing, and as is breathing, knowing that you can take something that is instinctual as getting oxygen for your body and actually make it a rational process. Like, I am controlling these breaths right now, right? It's coming at this pace that I'm controlling at this volume of air. Like, you can do a whole bunch of cool breathing exercises for anger management and other health aspects. I think that's powerful because it's something that usually you don't have control of, that you can take control of. And if you could do it with breathing, you could probably do it with fighting back or running away or whatever your anger response may be, right? Maybe the right decision is not to run away, it's to confront the thing making you angry. And conversely, maybe fighting not a good idea, and it wasn't, it wouldn't be worth physical altercation, whatever reasoning you're in. And
Yeah.
you can't come to that decision if you're in instinct mode.
Yeah, and I think part of it as well, at least for the anger that I was talking about for myself that I feel most often, which is a very like ego-driven anger. I think part of it is just being able to see a perspective outside of yourself, right? So why is it that when we have political discussions, when we have more larger moral discussions, where there's far more at stake and far more like ethical weight and importance to it, I'm not getting angry despite like the fact that we disagree on certain important things. Well, I think it's because I'm able to see a perspective outside myself. I'm able to accept that there is a view that is outside of my own that I don't think is as right as what I think, but I can still put value on and respect on and see outside of my own purview. Like, I remember somebody talking about this, and I wish I could attribute the quote, but it's to some author who said that the key to good writing is the death of ego. And I think that's also the key to, like, overcoming irrational anger. It's that death of ego. Like, are you angry because of something that is in your own ego because you think that you are right? Or is this something that is more universal and applicable, right? Somebody attacking somebody else, there being some sort of like more objective injustice in the world. That should lead you to anger. You should be angry about injustice. But people also feeling that there is something unjust in the world and having a different approach to how they want to solve that, that's not something that you should be angry about. That's not something that is rational when you're able to see beyond your own perspective and your own like little box.
Right. If not death of ego, then some sort of pause. If you can
Yeah.
allow it to not be the predominant decision making factor in your life, then yeah, being able to see a perspective outside of your own, very useful for disagreement based anger. And I guess to an extent, you might be able to disagree with yourself in explaining more of the like self anger, self loathing type, like
Yeah.
inwardly directed anger doesn't always have to manifest in like physical action.
Yeah, well, let me give an example. I always have some irrational anger at myself after I finished up at the gym because I'm just not making the progress that I want to make. And the fact is that I'm doing the work, and therefore I think that I should get a certain result. And to an extent, you should rationally and justifiably expect to improve as you're doing something over time with consistency. That's all correct. But that I should expect a certain result that has no basis in whether or not it's real or rational. Like, I haven't done the research to be like, well, should I be able to lift this weight by 6 months in or something like that? That's just me setting an expectation and getting upset with myself for not meeting an expectation that might be unrealistic, right? So, should I ever be upset with myself that, like, something isn't going well? Well, absolutely. If I find after that, like, I take a moment to breathe and look at it rationally, if it's like, well, I'm not doing things properly. I did not eat well or sleep well the night before. I skipped out on some workouts. If I've actually done something that I need to change and correct, that is a rational reason to be angry with myself. Now, the response should also be rational, right? I shouldn't go, bang my head against a wall for an hour as
don't be that
as
guy
punishment
in the gym.
Yep. But at the same time, like, should that anger be something that propels me to say, do better next time, to set a better routine, to keep better accountable, to hit the gym on days I otherwise would have skipped? Absolutely. And so, even in that case where the anger is all self-directed, there are aspects of that anger that are right and rational because some are based on my actions, and then there are those that are not because they're set on my unrealistic expectations. And then my response can either be rational, proportional to what's happening as well as productive, or they can be irrational and unproductive because keeping myself accountable to go to the gym is productive and rational. Banging my head against the wall in penance is irrational and unproductive.
Right. And because anger being an instinct is sometimes difficult to override with something like logic or rationale, it is possible. And we maybe haven't mentioned sometimes you could use other people.
Absolutely.
Have some sort of if you cannot bring that outside perspective internally, then you can use someone else's perspective. Of course, you got to get the right person, or else you're just two angry people, and that's not good for anyone. But yeah, you could have some counsel. If you're in a position that you feel some of that incongruous nature, talk about it with someone else. See if you're in the wrong. It's like that subreddit, am I the a-hole? Like sometimes people don't know, am I validly angry here? Is this response too much? If you're not sure, ask. And if you can't ask, it's probably not a good response, right? So it's a win-win either way.
Very true. Any closing thoughts about anger?
See, I was trying to come up with other times, and it's funny my mind went to the cart thing because it's so inconsequential. I'm sure like something has made me madder, but that one stuck with me. I won't go into details here, but I think the reason I bring up so many examples of like other people or something outside of myself being the cause of anger is partly because I always think like, what if it was my family or something? I think that is a very common source of anger for me, and I think for other people as well. You're always like,
you extrapolate.
It's like, you might do things in a situation where it affects someone you love that you wouldn't if it was just you, right? Like if all that was hurt was me, would I do this? Like sometimes you have to ask yourself that, because I think personally I would like, for the example I wanted to bring up, if a dog bit me and only me, I think I'd be mad, but probably not hold a grudge against a dog. Like, I would be looking for this dog's owner, probably, but I wouldn't be mad at the dog. But if that same dog bit my dog and was like continuing to attack it, I would be very, very angry. I would not be seeing the I don't know, caninity.
The nuance.
No, like is there humanity for dogs?
No.
Well, I'll just use humanity because I can't think of a better word. But I wouldn't be seeing the humanity in the other dog. I would be only seeing red because, you know, my dog is in danger. So, like, I have to act, you know. So there's no telling what I do. If it was just me, I'd probably be just, like, holding the dog there. Just getting into a position where it's not biting me anymore. But if it's attacking my dog, I might just grapple the thing until it can't bite anymore, you know? Like, I wouldn't just push it away and then let it come right back. It's like you got to take action, you know? It's like a protection thing. So I'm interested in knowing, like, to what degree do people's anger responses depend on, like, friends, family, loved ones, and, like, is there a different type of anger response for people that it's like just me? Like, I never get mad unless you disrespect me, you know, like that type of person. I'm sure they exist.
Yeah, as well as I think that there's, you know, we talked about taking a moment, breathing, all that. But there's also, you need instinctive knee-jerk reactions when there is some sort of immediate danger, right? So, you know, the anger that leads you to, like, tackle and, like, get that dog away from your dog, that's an instinctive action that you need to do something. Whatever you do after with that anger and either let it seethe or rationalize it, that's something that needs to be processed and thought through. But in the moment, you just got to act because there's an immediate situation.
Right, no time to process. And if you're getting, like, attacked or something, you probably don't want to do the stop, breathe method. But at some point,
that's what you do after the
afterwards.
Immediate situation has been resolved.
Yeah, at some point you do get the chance to do those types of activities. But yeah, I think we've talked about some very valid strategies for recognizing sources of anger and coming up with responses to that anger. Yeah, I don't think I've got more to add to the subject. If I think of a fun story, I'll try to sneak it in to another episode.
Well, I'm sure there'll be more sessions of public therapy, so you'll have no shortage of chances.
Right. Until next time, this has been Harold Owens.
And Joe Jason.
And our public therapy podcast. We do these and publish every other Monday. On Mondays where we don't have the mainline OPT episode, we do a check-in, a bonus episode, a little more lighthearted, but still in the same vein of bettering your health. So thanks for tuning in. Till next time. Thank you.